tuning in again for our second chat with the Dewey Divas. Today's we have Lahring Tribe. So Lahring is a book industry lifer, having worked in bookstores and for a book wholesaler before spending the last 27 years at Penguin Random House Canada, where she is the director of the school, library, and academic department. Frequently heard to moan, so many books, so little time. She enjoys reading anything for kids, adult fiction that makes her laugh, mysteries and history, and delights in sharing her finds with other readers. So I won't take up any more of your time. Here's Lahring.
Hi, I'm Lahring Tribe with Penguin Random House, and it's a real pleasure to have the chance to share some of my favorite books from the summer and fall seasons with you. And you'll notice as you look at my slides, there'll be a main cover on every slide and 2 or 3 additional books, because I love all of my books like my children. So the smaller covers are just books that are similar to the books I'm actually talking about. Starting with Hamlet and Judith. Maggie O'Farrell's novel opens with this note. In the 1580s, a couple living in Henley Street, Stratford, had 3 children, Susanna, then Hamlet, and Judith, who were twins. The boy, Hamlet, died in 1596, aged 11. 4 years or so later, the father wrote a play called Hamlet. From this note, you might be expecting a novel delving into the origins of one of the greatest plays in the English language, and that's what this is, richly imagined from a handful of facts. But it's not about the writing of the play. It's not even primarily about Shakespeare, who is never named in the book and only minimally referenced once he leaves Stratford for London. It is about his children, but it's mostly about their mother, Agnes, and domestic life in the town of Stratford in Elizabethan times, and the deep, gut-wrenching grief that follows the death of a child. There is an even eerily resonant subplot tracing the arrival of the plague in England. Pick this book up for its outstanding prose and for its capacity to envelop you in the sights, smells, and grim realities of another historical time. Leonard and Hungry Paul. Leonard and Hungry Paul was my delightful discovery for 2020, and I'm really delighted to be able to share it with you now. You may be familiar with Uplit, which would be books that make you feel better when you read them, and this is Uplit on steroids. By about page 7, I was smiling and wanting to read passage after passage out loud to someone. So what's the book about? Honestly, not much of anything. The title characters are 2 guys in their 30s who live with their parents. They have inconsequential jobs. One writes encyclopedias for kids while the other is a part-time postie, and they get together for conversation and board games. Their lives may seem small, but here's the thing. They're completely happy. They're comfortable in their own skins, and they're unconcerned about not being cool or not having the latest gadget. The writing is subtly witty rather than laugh out loud funny, with plenty of self-deprecating banter between the boys. I'm not claiming that this gentle, charming novel is a book for the ages, but it is a perfect book for the times in which we find ourselves. If you or your book club needed cheering up or an injection of contentment, you could do much worse than Leonard and Hungry Paul. Certainties. I suspect it's simply a response to COVID isolation, but books set in other places and times called out to me this season. As I read the Certainties, it became abundantly obvious to me that we are not the only people who have faced adversity, and many have faced a great deal more. As the book opens, the narrator is in a dingy hotel room, watching a barefoot vagrant shuffle along the beach, and debating whether it is better to die with your shoes on or off. He is an academic, vaguely Jewish, who finds himself in a small Spanish town with 2 friends. They belatedly fled France and the invading Nazis in the hope of getting to America, but he is slowly realizing that their window of escape has closed. He makes one last defiant trip to a cafe, and while drinking a glass of wine, he encounters a woman and her young daughter, Pia. Pia resurfaces a couple of decades later, working in a hotel kitchen on an island near the UK. As she prepares food for a wedding, a storm rages, sinking a boat offshore. This character-driven novel is absorbing, but not exactly cheerful. Not a lot happens, but it happens in great detail. This is a book of thoughts and conversations, not high-energy action. So we see the three friends debating their limited options and Pia helping to clear debris from the beach rather than the trek from France or the shipwreck itself. One common thread between the stories is the loving care with which food and wine are portrayed, offering a sensory technicolor note against the monochromatic background of the events. Queen of Tuesday. I'm going to let you in on a secret. Sometimes publishers lie when they're describing their books. Often the catalog copy doesn't describe the book with total accuracy. So I thought that Queen of Tuesday would be similar to books by Paula McLean or Melanie Benjamin, and that I'd be reading essentially an enhanced biography of Lucille Ball, exploring her conflicted personal life and business acumen. I should have read the author's afterword instead, in which he explains that he was attempting a hybrid of fiction and memoir, in which he expands upon the unverified family story that his grandfather had an affair with Lucille Ball. He pursues the "let's assume that it was true" angle with some gusto, portraying several encounters of which she gave him more than an autograph kind. But I was surprised at how much screen time Grandpa Izzy and his wife Harriet and their family and friends got in a novel I was expecting to be about Ms. Ball and the early days of television, although there is plenty of that as well. The result feels more like Red Daughter or Rodham than Aviator's Wife. It felt like historical fiction exploring gender roles and expectations and family dynamics in the middle of the 20th century. And there's certainly lots to talk about there. And I found it really quite satisfying, although the author's casual relationship with many established facts about Lucille Ball may be irritating or jarring for serious fans. This one is guaranteed to provoke debate among readers. Cascade. When I'm picking a book club list, I always like to include some short stories. This is Craig Davidson's first collection in 15 years, and the six stories are shimmering and muscularly gritty at the same time, as befits their slightly seedy, slightly magical, slightly haunted Cascade City setting, which is, of course, Niagara Falls. We meet a young woman struggling through the snow with her new baby shortly after the car crash that killed her husband, the members of a minor league basketball team, a demoralized social worker struggling with fertility issues, and a surgeon permanently affected by his mother's prenatal drinking, fraternal twins in a juvenile detention center, and siblings in a burning city. Along the way, we learn how one twin can devour the other in the womb, how it feels to freeze to death, and how fire burns. We encounter characters damaged by those who should never have been parents, and bodies that differ from the average, depicted in prose described by one reader as leaving you feeling gut-punched with words. These are stories you read fast and slow. Fast the first time to discover what happens, and then slow to appreciate Davidson's craft. And then you discuss the polarities he explores, large and small twins, a surgeon whose body is unequally developed on its left and right sides, violence and compassion, and family relationships in all their complexity. Transcendent Kingdom. Ya Jesse's Homegoing is one of the best books I have read in the last 5 years, perhaps ever, and her second book is every bit as good, which is not to suggest that it is the same, other than in the surpassing quality of its writing. Where Homegoing had the epic sweep of a huge cast of characters and 3 centuries of family history on 2 continents, Transcendent Kingdom is far more intimate. It covers only 3 decades, 2 cities, 1 family, and 1 point of view. Gifty, the daughter of immigrants from Ghana, is a brilliant young neuroscientist doing research into addiction, hoping to gain insights into her brother's death from a heroin overdose. Her mother is paralyzed by depression, and as Gifty carries out her experiments in a strictly regimented lab, she longs for the comfort of the Pentecostal faith of her childhood, even if she can no longer accept all of its tenets. But a mere plot summary can't convey what is wonderful about reading this book. It's the kind of book you read with no effort and no sense of time passing. It captures much that is universal in the experiences of one person. It addresses the immigrant experience, the pressures placed on people of color seeking a better life than their parents had, addiction and mental illness, family dynamics, and the pull of faith. This book contains much that is relatable, even if the story is not your own. And it's absolutely genuine. It will break your heart, but without fake feels or a hint of manipulation. Please do give this one a try. Consent. You may know Annabelle Lyon from her earlier historical novels, Golden Mean and Sweet Girl. This is absolutely contemporary and set in Canada. It features two pairs of sisters. In each pair, one is more capable and responsible, the other more vulnerable and dependent. So we have Sarah, an ethics expert with expensive tastes, and Mattie, who is developmentally delayed. We also have stable Saskia, pursuing a graduate degree in literature, and her wildly impulsive twin Jenny, an interior designer who maxes out her credit cards and lives on the edge. Consent contains almost as much sensory detail as the Certainties. These people like to eat and drink too, and actually quite a bit happens. An accident leaves Jenny unable to move or speak, communicating only through blinks. Sarah and Mattie's mother dies, leaving Sarah to take over her sister's care. She starts by annulling Mattie's marriage to Robert, who is sweet and gentle with her, but he's only a handyman and he may be out to exploit her. And can Mattie even give informed consent to marriage and all it involves? Consent is very much a theme throughout the book, Mattie's marriage being the most obvious but not the only example. There is also having to assume responsibility for family members, whether you want to or not, and being manipulated into doing things that others feel would be for your own good. The result is oddly suspenseful and tense, despite its focus on character. For some reason, I keep coming back to Robert, who becomes the fifth business in the story, unwittingly connecting the two pairs of sisters and becoming the catalyst for much of what happens. If I had to pick only one of the titles I'm talking about today to recommend for book clubs, this would be that book. Waiting for a Star to Fall. This one had me at the dedication. For every woman who was ever 23, since that's a lot of us, even if some of us have some trouble remembering the specifics. Brooke doesn't. She is that 23-year-old. She wakes up one morning to a social media storm. Derek, the golden boy politician she used to work for, has been accused of sexual impropriety by two women. Until recently, it would have been her job to mount the counteroffensive campaign, but not now. She's no longer in the city, but back in the town she and Derek both come from, working in a library. Over the next few days, she reflects on her connection to Derek, being recruited during a chance encounter in a bar, rising from being an intern, one of the pack of young women he surrounded himself with, to a confidant, to something more, to, well, where she finds herself now. I could say more, but the appeal of the book lies in accompanying Brooke as she figures things out in a way that works for her, using her experiences to help define who she is and what she wants from her future. There is certainly lots to talk about. Why do people do what they do? Why do we make allowances for men, particularly men in positions of power? How do our childhood experiences affect our sense of self and reality? And how do we respond when our idols have feet of clay? 8 detectives. And now for a different kind of mystery. This debut by an author with a PhD in math and who works at Waterstones in Britain, will take you back to the golden age of the crime novel. I swear I could hear the theme music from Poirot playing as I was reading. Basically, it's a story within a story. A mathematician wrote a paper outlining the principles that underpin all detective fiction. Then he wrote 7 stories illustrating those principles. He called the collection The White Murders, and he more or less disappeared. Years later, a young editor tracks him down on a Mediterranean island with the expressed interest of republishing the stories. As she reads the stories to him, she notices discrepancies which may be tied to an unsolved case in the UK from 30 years earlier, tantalizingly known as The White Murders, same as the collection title. The stories are classic puzzle mysteries. The appeal is cerebral rather than emotional. There's little character development or adrenaline-laced adventure. Pavese is clearly a bit of an overachiever as he provides 2 endings to the framing story, but you don't need a genius-level IQ to appreciate the book. A sense of nostalgia, a willingness to play along, and perhaps a glass of dry sherry are perfectly adequate. This one is for readers or book clubs who enjoy authorial audacity in books that remain readable. Mermaid from Jeju. Mermaid from Jeju is part of Crooked Lane's new Alcove Press women's fiction imprint. The framing story takes place in 2001, beginning in the US and ending in Korea, but the majority of the events occur in 1948 on the island of Jeju off the coast of Korea. Jeju may sound familiar because it's the setting for the Island of Sea Women, and this novel also depicts the haenyeo for which the island is famous, the so-called mermaids, women who support their families by diving for seafood. Junja is training to be a haenyeo like her mother and grandmother in a community desperately wishing to leave World War II and the Japanese occupation behind. For much of the first part of the book, they are successful. The story focuses on the matriarchal world of the divers and the natural beauty of the island, and even the budding romance between Junja and Suwol, a boy from the mountains. There's also a hint of magic in the elements of traditional culture, which are frequently referenced. Then Lieutenant Lee, the harbinger of a greater military presence, appears. Behind him are the occupying American troops who are determined to locate and eradicate communist sympathizers. Beauty is overwhelmed by brutality as suspicions flare and tragedy ensues, although Han's writing remains as poetic at the beginning, making the contrast even more poignant. This is a World War II story you probably didn't know, featuring ordinary people caught in the crossfire of nations and North Americans blundering into a situation they don't understand, redeemed by an ending which is magical in every sense of the word. If you enjoy historical fiction but would like to explore a different setting, this might be a possibility. When the Apricots Bloom. Like Mermaid from Jeju, When the Apricots Bloom is a debut set far from Canada, in which ordinary people find themselves coping with extraordinary circumstances not of their own making. We meet 3 women in Saddam's Iraq: Huda, a secretary at the Australian embassy; Ali, the wife of the deputy ambassador at that embassy; and Rania, privileged daughter of a sheik and Huda's blood sister, until a tragedy rooted in politics divided them. Each woman has a mission. Ali is trying to find out more about her recently deceased mother, who worked as a nurse in Iraq several decades ago, while Rania and Huda are supporting their families and keeping their children safe as Saddam and his secret police tighten their grip on the nation. By accident or design, their paths cross, and they become somewhat uneasy friends. Trust is a rare commodity as Iraq morphs from a land of plenty and beauty to a place of repression and corruption. And then Huda is asked to spy on Ali. Her husband has lost his job and her compliance will keep her son out of the militia, so she really has no choice. The suspense ratchets up as the story progresses, but the book's real strength is in its exploration of the moral dilemmas faced by the characters, and the light it casts on female friendship and familial loyalty. What would any of us do if we found ourselves in such situations? And finally, a nonfiction title, Gollum Girl. Riva Lair was born in 1958, one of the first children with spina bifida to survive past the age of 2. She survived because of the determination of her mother and a pioneering doctor, but the outcome was multiple surgeries designed to fix her and make her normal. She tells her story as a series of episodes illustrated by pieces of art, so the reader can share in her epiphanic aha moments, like the experience of watching Heidi cure Clara, or interactions with her mother, with whom she had a complicated relationship, to say the least. Ultimately, she found a place of belonging with artists experiencing a variety of disabilities, determined to create their own culture. This is not an easy read. You will likely alternate between aha moments of your own and uncomfortable squirms. If you're looking for a feel-good story of triumph over adversity by a patient sufferer, what a disabled friend of mine calls inspiration porn, this isn't it. Lehrer is assertive, prickly, unapologetic, and often not especially likable. If you or your book club are looking for an honest, thoughtful, warts and all rendering of the experience of disability and how it affects identity, a book that will make you think very hard and might change how you behave, then this could very well be it. And that is my list. I hope you find something among these books that you will read and enjoy.
Well, I've definitely found a few things, I think. I really, for the first one that you mentioned, Hamlet and Judith, yeah. I'm also super excited for, I wrote them down, The Mermaid from Jeju and Transcendent Kingdom. I was looking at Transcendent Kingdom for a long time, just about other cultures and like things that we might not be familiar with. So I'm pretty excited to read those.
Again, both splendid books. Transcendent Kingdom probably feels a little more literary. I confess I was a little apprehensive when I picked it up because I loved her first book so much. It was,
yeah.
And she's such a young woman. She's still in her mid-20s, which is kind of intimidating. Wow. But I think, and many others of the book as well, but I want to reach an even broader audience because it just speaks so eloquently to the experience of being a person of color. So it is that perfect both window and mirror book.
Yeah.
So, you know, some people will see themselves in the story and others will come away with a greater understanding.
Yeah, that's awesome. I kind of found that the one that Andrea mentioned, not similar exactly, but it's that kind of like staying true to your culture or like, you know, true to yourself, or and how do you encompass both of those things? I kind of find like, yeah, it's got that kind of coming together element. At least I perceived it that way, but yeah, I thought that would be, there's a lot of good choices in there. Yeah.
Well, it's our hope that people are now spoiled for choice and, you know, have the trauma of trying to decide just what they're going to read first.
Yeah. Thanks again, and we hope you've enjoyed today's presentation with the Dewey Divas. Next time we'll have Rosalind, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all there. So until then, bye.